Hello everybody and welcome to the Disruptive Innovation Festival. The DIF is an online festival of ideas curated by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that asks the question, what if we could redesign everything? In this session today, called Scales of Circular Economy, we'll be talking to three people to provide insights into circular economy at a national level, at a business level, and a community-led bottom-up approach. In a moment, I'll pass things over to Della Duncan, live from Schumacher College, who will introduce today's three speakers and facilitate the discussion. My name is Leo, and before I hand things over to Della and the three esteemed guests, please do contribute your questions and comments throughout the session using the comment space just below this session page and on Twitter using #ThinkDiff. On the session page, you may need to complete a one-click process to sign up for a MyDiff account to ask your questions, but Della will try her best to feed those into the conversation. So without any further ado, Della, it's over to you.
Great. Hello. Thank you, everyone. Welcome.
You're here.
Yes, we're doing the webinar right now.
I'm sorry. Hello. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Della Duncan, and this is Scales of the Circular Economy as part of the Disruptive Innovation Festival. And right now, we are joined by three people, as Leo said. And we have Juanto Yu, who is calling from China, where he is the director of the research department in the China Development Research Foundation. We also have Julie Richardson, who's from Southwest England. She has an extensive career in the field of development and sustainability, and she is a senior lecturer of economics at Schumacher College, and also knows a lot about this area where Schumacher College is in the Totnes area. And then we have Joe Murphy as well, who manages the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's Circular Economy 100 Business Network. So as Leo said, we'll be looking at the different scales of the circular economy and also different perspectives. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. We're going to actually start with Joe Murphy. So again, I said that Joe really is coming from the perspective of business. So Joe Murphy, my question for you is what are some of the experiences that you have working with the circular economy in businesses? So maybe some of the stories or examples or insights that you have from working with this group of people that you work with, this cohort.
Yeah, thanks, Stella. Okay, so yeah, to clarify, my role is managing the C100 network, and I therefore am primary point of contact for all of the business relationships that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has through the C100. So I spend all day, every day, talking to businesses about their circular economy challenges and opportunities and just the journey that they're on individually. And I thought the best way to answer this question is to run through a series of case studies, a series of examples from across our network. And there is lots and lots of going on. There's lots of activity in the market. There's lots of individual activity. There's lots of collaborative activity. And hopefully this will just bring to light some of the maybe more popular examples. So if we're talking about scale, we could start big with the biggest company in the planet, which is Apple. So some of you might know that Apple made a public statement earlier this year, which is that they want to decouple from mining, which essentially means that they want to stop using finite resources in their supply chain. So they want to make all of their products from materials that are either renewable or recycled. They haven't put a timeline on that. It's a really ambitious statement, but they are doing some interesting things just to indicate that they really are investing in this as a strategy. So if you haven't seen the robot Liam, I suggest having a little Google of Apple's Liam robot. That is actually a series of 26 robots that can disassemble the iPhone 6, I think, one model of iPhone. So it's an example where a company is investing quite heavily in automation, in robotics, and looking at disassembly, not just assembly. And they're making a whole load of learnings about what they can do with these materials once they disassemble their products, and what is really available in the market in terms of recycling and getting kind of after use materials back to a virgin quality is a challenge across some of the materials that they use. That's one example. So maybe looking at kind of automation and working with the supply chain. You think about business models. There's a very famous business model, which is the Philips lighting model. So Philips have an offer of to buy your lighting as a service. So they quite famously have implemented that in Schiphol Airport. So one of the terminals in Schiphol Airport, all of the lighting in that airport is procured under a service contract. So Schiphol don't actually own any of the light fittings or light bulbs in that terminal. They just pay a subscription fee to Philips, who can then repair, remanufacture, and at end of life, take those products back into the business. When you think about materials, this is at the end of the day a big conversation around materials. You think about materials that exist in the supply chain. CNA recently announced the first cradle-to-cradle certified T-shirt. So it's a gold certified T-shirt. You can buy that in any CNA store, I think globally, and it's a €9 or €12 T-shirt. So it's an example of where they're trying to meet the customer demands that they have on price. And the whole business model built around getting products out at scale. That's how these big companies work today. But at the same time, thinking about what material inputs they're putting in at the very beginning and very manufacturing. So they have a cradle-to-cradle gold certified factory that is able to put these products on the market. Another example, maybe a bit more collaborative example, you see two companies working together across a certain geography. So Tarkett and Veolia. Tarkett are a big flooring company. They supply kind of veneered flooring. I think they even supply football turf to some of the major football teams. So there's all flooring of all types, basically. They've partnered with Veolia. And they have an initiative that covers the whole of France, where when a business is installing Tarkett flooring into one of their sites, Veolia has a service to collect the offcuts from the flooring that will be fed straight back into Tarkett's manufacturing process. And they're able to do this in this kind of B2B scale because the businesses are buying so much carpet, there is so much waste in the installation, and so it makes sense from a business case for those two companies to roll out that initiative. So that's thinking about collection, reverse logistics, and doing that at a national scale. That covers France at the moment, that initiative. Efficiency is also an important part of this whole conversation. One of my favorite examples is Google, who have used their artificial intelligence algorithms, applied them to their data centers to capture just very impressive energy savings on the operation of their data centers, which is one of the core costs or key costs for them as a business. And now they're thinking about how they can apply those same algorithms to the national grid or to grids across the US or in Europe, to have a similar approach to efficiency savings. So that's some examples of companies working individually, working maybe bilaterally. We also have in the C100 collaboration projects, what we call co-projects, and these are pre-competitive initiatives that allow or enable different organizations to come work together on a very specific scope, a project with a very specific scope, and really start to understand where the new kind of connection points could be as these businesses start to rethink their traditional linear business models. So just a very few quick examples of those. G diapers have a kind of a nappy that can be industrially composted. So it's maybe a little bit gross to think, but actually the nutrient value of a used nappy is quite high. And they have launched a co-project with collaboration with the London Waste and Recycling Board, and also Hera Group, who are an Italian waste provider, to test the feasibility of a business model to be capturing used nappies across nurseries in the city, and then the feasibility of actually feeding those into an industrial composter to prove that actually this type of organic waste does not contaminate the process and actually produces valuable feedstock at the end of the composting. We have a project looking at chemical contaminants in textiles or fibers. So IKEA, Marks and Spencer's, Bestseller, who own Jack and Jones, and H&M have come together to do a whole load of scientific testing on post-consumer jeans, and they're really trying to identify what are the chemical contaminants that are inhibiting high quality recycling. And they've co-funded some actual lab tests between them. We have a group looking at applying circular principles to the built environment. So Royal BAM are a construction company, Arup are a very global engineering company. London are involved in this and providing a site. And they're looking at how they could apply circular principles to a regeneration development project in the borough, in a borough in London. And it's not all big business. There's lots of small businesses involved as well. They're a key component of the C100 mix, that startups have a massive role today to play in bringing innovation into the C100 and into the whole circular economy space. So one example from that is Ecor, who are no stranger to the DIF. Ecor Global participated last year. They manufacture composite materials from different waste streams. And one example where their product is being applied is that they are turning organic waste streams from Schiphol airports, various kind of retail outlets, into paneling that's going to be used in construction of one of their new terminals. And Ecovative, who are an old one but a good one, who make a polystyrene substitute for packaging. So it's made from a mushroom feedstock. So they're actually growing kind of big, bulky kind of packaging, protective packaging, which is now used in the Dell supply chain. So Dell will package all of their B2B servers using Ecovative mushroom packaging. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of some of the kind of at-scale implementation projects, some of the smaller implementation projects, some of the pre-competitive collaboration projects that are happening. And as I said, I do believe that's really the tip of the iceberg. You know, there is a lot of stuff happening within the C100, within individual organizations and in the wider ecosystem.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for all those examples of different scales of business. We're moving to a different scale, a different perspective. Let's hear from Julie Richardson. So Julie, you're based in Totnes area of Southwest England, and you have a background in kind of the bottom up, the grassroots or the local community scales of the circular economy. So for you, I'm wondering, can you talk about the circular economy in this kind of scale, in this kind of local community scale? And also, because you have a background in in ecology, can you talk about how circular economy connects with ecological design thinking and ecological principles in general?
Okay, thank you, Della. Yeah, so I'm calling from Schumacher College here in South Devon in England, and Schumacher College is a centre for transformative education for sustainable living. And I wanted to share with you an experiment that we've been engaged with others here in South Devon, because one of the first things I noticed when I came to Schumacher College was that the surrounding land wasn't really demonstrating in practice what we were teaching in the classroom. So we went about setting up an experiment in creating a circular economy inspired land use approach down here in Devon. And the first thing that we did was we mapped out the assets in the area. We mapped out our land assets and our rural assets, many of which were underutilized or semi-derelict. So it included agricultural land, woodlands, pasture, industrial units, and so forth. And we created a kind of a bottom-up vision about what would it look like if different types of sustainable land-based rural enterprises came onto the estate, if we could incubate them here, not as separate enterprises, but as a network, as a community of businesses linked in many different ways. So we were inspired by the waste equals food principles from circular economy, but also other ecological principles like feedback and networks and synergy and so forth. So the intention was really to stimulate the local economy, support community resilience and vitality. So we're really interested in the underlying relationships behind those enterprise relationships, and to demonstrate the circular economy and ecological thinking in practice. So I'm just going to share with you some of our initial thinking. I've got a few slides here. So as you see, very low scale, very low tech. We just started mapping out for our woodlands asset here what could be a range of small scale community type enterprises and projects that could be linked together. And this was just a very kind of back of the envelope type vision. So we thought, well, we could have furniture making, and we could have production of biomass fuels, and the waste could be composted and so forth. So we just started mapping out just in a very high level vision, but inspired by principles from circular economy, such as zero waste and created closed loop systems, as well as drawing from industrial ecology or industrial symbiosis, which is all about where creating collaboration by geographic proximity. So we were really keen on actually the relationships between organizations. And this wonderful idea of economies of scope, that in economics, economies of scale is a very dominant and popular idea, but there are also economies of scope to be gained arising from product synergies, cooperation and collaboration, and byproducts and shared costs. So this was our intention in our initial mapping. And well, let me just go back. So we also wanted to introduce into our experiment other principles from ecological thinking in practice, such as systems thinking and networks and feedback and learning and adaptation, and how this could be a really community-led bottom-up process. So we didn't have a grand plan, we didn't have a grand land use plan. What we were doing was setting the conditions to attract in enterprises. And one of those, so it was a very self-organizing, emergent and creative process, rather than other ways of creating circular economy, which is more based on planning and input-output tables. What we wanted to do was create the conditions for a self-organizing and emergent process. So how we went about it was we had our land assets, and we invited local entrepreneurs to send in proposals for possible enterprises or projects that they could set up based on these land assets that we'd identified. And the big thing that made the difference was not only did we want those enterprises to demonstrate their sustainability, we also wanted them to show creative synergies and collaboration to create a network of businesses and projects on the local land. So, for example, we were looking for how can the waste from one activity be a resource input into another activity. But beyond that, we were also looking for economies that arose from product synergies, byproducts, sharing costs, and also economies arising from trust and cooperation. So, as I mentioned, it's a very bottom-up, community-led, participatory process. So I just wanted to share some of the examples of the types of projects that were attracted in by this invitation. So the first one is called Grow Cycle. And this is a very often used as a case study of the circular economy in practice, where mushrooms are grown from waste. And so certainly we had Grow Cycle growing exotic mushrooms using the waste from the local craft brewery that was also set up. so the New Line Brewery. So they inoculated their grains from those they inoculated the grains from the oyster mushroom spores, and the grown mushrooms were returned to the brewery to create a unique oyster mushroom flavor craft beer. And this craft beer was named the circular economy in a glass, which I think is just wonderful to really bring to life this technology. So a second project that's been attracted here onto the surrounding land is two forestry related projects. So we had the Forestry Commission coming in with a research project wanting to plant trees and do research on the impacts of different species on biodiversity, on soil, on hydrology, and so forth. And so one of the byproducts that arose out of this research was the production of biomass for renewable heat generation on the estate. So this is an example of a synergistic product that arose between two enterprises. And another forestry-related project is the Agroforestry Research Trust, based here next to Schumacher College. This is an excellent example of a technology of forest gardening, which is a form of biomimicry. It copies the natural forest ecosystem to produce a variety of fruits, nuts, materials, and biomass, and it has the natural principle of a zero waste system. And finally, one more project that I wanted to share that came onto a derelict site, an old horticultural site that hadn't been used for some years. And School Farm Community Supported Agriculture Cooperative was created, and they produce organic fruit and veg and flowers using a very low-tech minimum tillage technology. And what's interesting here about the synergies is that they started producing, they started supplying organic fruit and veg for Schumacher College and other centres on the estate, and in return we were sending our students there for sustainable horticultural training. So these three examples, I mean, we have many more, and over a short period of time we began to attract in a network of small businesses that weren't existing in isolation, but were designed for collaboration and synergy, and to demonstrate circular economy and industrial symbiosis in practice, as well as revitalizing the local economy, as well as revitalizing the community and creating greater community resilience. And so this diagram is an example. All the different enterprises that we attracted on aren't on this diagram, but it begins to show how that very back of the envelope vision that we had at the beginning of the project was beginning to manifest in practice in unexpected and unpredictable ways because of its design process as a bottom-up self-organizing land use system. And so we've been experimenting in this way here at Schumacher College and the surrounding land, but we're very connected with our local town, Totnes. Some of you will know Totnes is at the centre of an international social movement of what are called transition towns. And transition towns are where
Julie, to jump in for a moment, are you referring to slide 5 in your presentation? Because we're still viewing slide 1. So I just want to make sure we get to see that network that you're talking about.
Oh, okay. So no, I've gone through all the slides.
Okay, if you could click on slide 5 on the side of your presentation, just so we could see that one, if that's what you're referring to.
5?
I believe so.
It says creating a sustainable land-based local economy.
Yes, if you could click on that one, so that's the one that we can view. Right now we're just viewing the first slide, but we'd love to see the one you're referring to.
Oh, sorry. So I have been going through all the slides.
There you go. Now we see it. Thank you. That's perfect.
Okay, sorry. Should I quickly go? No, okay, let's just stick with this. So yeah, so this slide shows how our initial vision that we had on the back of the envelope is now manifesting in in practice, in real connections across the enterprises that have been attracted on. And I just wanted to finish by talking about our relationship with our local town, Transition Town Totnes, which is at the centre of a global movement of people and communities coming together to reimagine what their community could be like beyond dependence on oil, for example. And they're very inspired by the circular economy and industrial ecology in how they've come together to do that. So they're now over 1,400 transition communities in 50 countries over the world. And over this experience, they've identified 20 enterprises. Stella, can you see that, the new economy in 20 enterprises?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so they have identified these 20 core enterprises that provide the foundation for a strong, local, resilient and sustainable economy. But the key thing about the transition towns is that they are the ones that are making the connections between all of these enterprises. So they're looking for those synergies where waste equals food, or where there's economies of cooperation or byproducts. And they therefore it's the community that provides the glue to create this network of local enterprise. And it's all about growing trust and cooperation and mutual support to create that community vitality based on real economic relationships of mutual benefit. So that, I know that's been a little bit of a whirlwind tour, but I just wanted to give you a flavour of what we've been up to and our approach to the circular economy, which is very community orientated, participatory, bottom up, and based on relationships of mutuality, cooperation, and to grow community vitality. So thank you very much, and very happy to take any questions at the end. Thank you, Della.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it's great to hear about the process and how organic it is. So thank you for that. So we'll now hear from Jiantou Yu, calling in from China. And this is at a totally different scale. This is the national scale that we'll be hearing about because China is implementing circular economy practices into law and policy. So we're very happy to have you, Jiantou. And so if I can ask you about the process of circular economies coming into the national frame and narrative, and also being put into policies and laws at the national level, if you could tell us that story and give us some examples. Thank you.
Okay, Della, thank you, and thank you everyone. Good morning or good evening for everyone. I'm Jiantou Yu from China Development Research Foundation, and my foundation is a think tank organization, and we have this year we will release a report on sustainable use of resource in China. So today I would like to share with you some the recent progress on China's circular economy, and also as required, I will introduce very briefly about China's how Chinese government scale up all the and a bit about the policy framework at this moment. So many people will be quite curious about why Chinese government makes such huge efforts in recent years in circular economy, and the reason behind this is China now is the world's largest, second largest economy, and as I show in this slide, you can see how Chinese economy grow compared to India, and actually in the last 4 decades, more than 700 million Chinese people have been lifted out of the poverty and contributed a lot to world poverty alleviation issue. And also now China's share in the world economy increased from 1.2% in 1979. Now it's very close to the 15%. So such a huge scale economy. So we will use lots of resources. And now China has already been the world's largest resource user, and also we are the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, and we also face challenges in improving energy efficiency of resource use, as you see the data from OECD, and to produce $1 GDP, China will use at least about 2.5 kilogram materials, but on average in the OECD it's only 0.5 kilogram. So we have a huge gap in resource use efficiency, and and also now China has China's solid. We also produce a huge volume of industrial and domestic solid waste. In recent years, we can see the since 2012, every year China produce about 3.2 billion tons of industrial solid waste. And we were pleased to see the total volume of annually produced solid waste has to keep constant, and we look forward one day it will turn down and to improve the efficiency of resource use and reduce the pollution. So, there are some milestones in promoting circular economy in China. Actually, in 1979, China released its first law on environmental protection, and later it has formally approved by People's Congress in 1989, and recently amended in 2014. And in 2002, China has realized challenges in environment and ecology protection. So in 2002, we released a law on clean production promotion. And lately, in 2005, the State Council of Chinese government released opinions on accelerating development of a circular economy, but it's the first time, I think, at a national level, the concept of circular economy has entered the government's documents, the central government's document. But before that, also there is some industrial level and discussion on this topic. And most important, in 2008, the Chinese government released the circular economy promotion law. This is the first law I'm not sure whether in the worldwide, but it's in China it's a very important that laid a solid foundation for circular economy development in China. And after that, the Chinese, we all know China has transformed from a planning economy. Now we are a market economy country, but every 5 years, Chinese government will produce 5-year plan to guide the national economy economic transition. So in 2012, the government released the development plan on circular economy in the 5-year plan, and this is a specific national development plan on circular economy. And the aim of the plan is to improve resource use efficiency by at least 15%. Actually, China has what China has already done and has already achieved this target, and did much more than this. And in 2003, we have a development strategy and action when China, the central government done this, released the national level plan, and all provincial government will follow this model, and we have a provincial, or in the United States as a state level, or we have a provincial action plan to match with the national level policy. And China, we have not like many other countries. We have 5 levels of government. At the top is the central level, and the second tier is provincial level, and then we have a prefecture level city, and we have a county, and then we have a township. So after the central government has an action plan, and all local government at different levels, they will make their own action plan to this. So, regarding the policy process, the scale up, it's quite different from many people think. What's the first impression? Well, we always talking about whether China's policy making is an implementation is a top-down process or bottom-up process. No, it's not a simple top-down and or bottom-up. Actually, there are lots of rounds of negotiation, discussion between central government and the different level of local government. So I will summarize some very typical steps on this issue, because it's the first when government, whatever central level or local level, they face some challenges. So they will identify what the problem is, and the scale of the problem, and the seriousness of the problem, and they will try to identify their needs in this, how to address with this issue. And then the local level, usually local level, the central government will allow, not formally, but will allow local government to take some action to address these problems, and allow some local pilots. So after 1 or 2 years, and sometime even half a year, so the local government will summarize the experience of pilot, and also they will also invite academia and the business sector to jointly work with them, and to summarize their experience of pilot, and submit to higher government level, and then literally reach to the central government. Or in some cases, if the problem is very important and very, very critical, so they will submit the problem to the central government directly. And then this, so they will expand the regional, the pilot to a regional level, and the national, and became a national policy. And the policy is sometimes more flexible and adjustable. And if this is a real important issue, then the lessons and experience from pilots will be seriously thinking about, thought about, and they will enter the more formal and formal policy framework, like national plan, and a special or specialized national plan, and even law as a circular economy promotion law, etc. So so then, based on according to the law, the central government will mobilize more resources to this area, and to expand the scale and the scope of pilots. So that's what happened in China. Take the circular economy as an example. We will see that in 2005, the State Council has released opinions of the State Council on the circular economy. So it's many local government has took action, and they set up, and the central government allow local and actually partly grant many pilots. And the first pilots program include 42 enterprise, 13 industrial parks. In China, industrial park is a very important role in economic growth. And 4 key areas, including steel, non-ferrous metal, and also chemical and construction material in 2005. Then there has been a second round of pilots in 2007, include also around 40 different local regions. And in 2008, we have a circular economy promotion law, and then national 5-year plan followed. And we also have a specialized plan for this circular economy. And we have another round of pilots. This pilots cover different, by different dimension. Well, we have, in some cases, it's by pilots conducted by administrative levels, provincial level or prefecture city level or county level, etc. And also by industry like steel, coal, cement, and also the chemical and construction material, non-ferrous and metal, etc. And also by enterprise, if this is a big enterprise, and also the local industrial park in China to promote economic growth. So previously,
Hello, are we all there? I can't hear Juanto. Oh, okay, you're back.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay,
can you repeat that last sentence, please?
Okay, so the pilot has been conducted by administrative levels and by industry and by enterprise and industrial park, because in China, industrial park play a very important role in economic growth. So previously, the central government just encouraged all local government at a different level to establish their own industrial park. But now it has some problem, and so we needed to merge some inefficient industrial park together and then move them together to reduce pollution and to provide better public service to the company. So it's very useful to set up pilots in the industrial park. That's why I mentioned this so much. So in 2013, the many enterprise and non-government organizations, also the academia and the government, retired senior government officials, they work together and establish China Association on the Circular Economy, and which established a platform to communicate lessons, experience at the national level, and also they organize lots of activities to borrowing experience from abroad. So, and I also want to mention there is some lots of joint efforts in intergovernmental department, because the environmental issue not only related to environmental protection, Ministry for Environmental Protection, but also many other ministry like Ministry of Territory and Resource, and Ministry of Physical Finance, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce, etc., and National Development and the Reform Commission, the most important ministry in China. So this is a joint work. We have a horizontal joint efforts. We also have vertical joint efforts, and also has some efforts together with from different stakeholders. So that's this is a process, the process of China's circular economy. How Chinese government scale up their the policy and to implement this. So I would like you cite 2 cases. One is Ziya Circular Economy Industrial Park. This is a special national level industrial park specialized in circular economy. So now it's it's in Tianjin, one of autonomous city in China. Now the total Tianjin has more than 10 million people. But Ziya Circular Economy Industrial Park located in Jinghai district of Tianjin. So yeah, the whole park now it has the total area is about 50 kilometers. But the planned area, according to the plan, the whole area will be 150 square kilometers in the future. So now there are more than 387 companies has entered to this industrial park, and many of them are largest apparatus producer in China, like TCL. Maybe you have heard about this, and many other facilities and manufacturing company. And in last year, they has already now they has already disposed 1.5 million tons of industrial solid waste in last year, and they has they have produced.
I just want to do a 1 minute mark.
Yeah, you can. You can. Okay, you can see that they produce lots of copper, aluminum, and iron, rubber. So it's and also saved coal by 5.2 million tons, and reduced CO2 emission by 1.6 million tons, etc. So it's produce lots of economic values, and also bring has a very good environmental return. And another case is Shangluo city. It's a prefecture level city, but it's a national demonstration city of a circular economy. And it's a circular economy include many different dimensions, including industry, and include circular industry, circular agriculture, and the circular tertiary industry, etc. So because Shangluo is a place they are famous of mining industry. So, but in China, mining many mining industries don't have a good performance in using the mine tailing. So now this many industrial solid waste has been produced. So now there has significantly increased their reuse rate of industrial solid waste. Most of them are mining tailing. Now it's about more than very close to the 3/4. So that's what the China's policy making process and implementation and the local practice. Thank you. And I would like to take time to answer some questions lately.
Great, thank you, Junto. It's very impressive. Thank you for that. Thank you. So we're open now for questions from folks who are listening and questions for each other. So I'll jump right in with a question that we received from someone who's tuning in. This question is for you, Joe. This question is based off of what we just heard from Junto Yu about the policy and legislative frameworks in China. Do you think that any of those could be useful in terms of the work you're doing in businesses? So could any of them be used in kind of a Western context, the laws, the policies, to help the work that you're doing and the work in businesses in particular? So Joe, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, indeed, I do. I have some thoughts about that, and I'm definitely going to try and deflect this question back on Junto as well, because I'm not an expert in Chinese policy. But I think if you think about some of the drivers for businesses really engaging with this topic, and some of the drivers for kind of really investing in kind of testing and prototyping some of the new models and technologies, there is a policy element to that. There's a policy evolution element to that. So, you know, in Europe, we're seeing or have seen the development of the circular economy package from the EU, the plastic strategy, which is being formulated at the moment. these contain elements that really are indicating that there's an evolution of policy towards creating the conditions for a kind of more circular economy within the EU. And recently, in the UK, I live in the UK in London, and Michael Gove was talking recently about introducing deposit schemes on certain formats of plastic packaging. So I think these types of policy evolutions have a very big impact on the way business perceives, their engagement with circular economy topic. When it comes to China and EU, so that this is where I kind of flip the question back to Jin too, is that there is this dynamic where a lot of the products that we use are kind of designed and marketed and kind of used or consumed in Europe or the US, but actually manufactured in China. And so my kind of question to Jin too is, how does Jin too see the kind of policy evolution in China really impacting that dynamic? That's something I'd be keen to hear more about.
Okay, thank you, Joe. You just mentioned a case of Apple. Actually, this morning, the director of public affairs of Apple China as economy, and we are talking about how to set a project specifically on circular economy, and this is about on recycling of Apple's iPhone in China, because they are under pressure because Chinese government has communicated with Apple whether because now there are lots the Apple produce every 1 or 2 years they will have new products, and people and then and so people will replace new one, so it's could create lots of ecological and environmental challenge. So we are think tank, so they are not in the government, but so we are talking about this, but the main thinking is following China's national strategy, and as you may note, China just has finished our 19th National Party Congress and released a new action plan for the next not only 5 years, for next decades. So ecology and environmental is the one key topic of this. So that's and many manufacturing company, including Apple and many other companies, they have a response, very responsive to this change, and there's a new focus of Chinese government. So they want to explore and to establish formal collaboration with the Chinese government and also with the think tanks like us. So I'm not sure whether this can answer your question. So.
Yeah, indeed. No, it did. And I think it's interesting, I suppose, that there is just maybe new ways or new kind of forms of dialogue that are starting to exist between policymakers and business around solving these topics, because clearly to be able to reach solutions, we do require this systemic approach. So it's good to hear that is happening over there as well as over here.
Thank you. And Joe, did you have a question you wanted to ask Julie about the scalability and replicability in other cities or towns?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I really love the story. I think so. There were two questions in that. One is the replicability of, I can't say that word, but of the model. So could you create a toolkit that would be able to be implemented in other rural communities? And the second question is slightly different, is probably around scale. So if you think about applying that methodology to a city where you just have a lot more people, a lot more complexity, potentially a lot more kind of flows of materials and energy and finance and information, yeah, again, could you take, are there lessons or is there a role for digital technology potentially to help take that to a different scale?
Well, thanks, Joe, for that question. And also thanks to you both for such an impressive and inspiring examples of the circular economy. I mean, I'd love to come and visit the national demonstration city of circular economy in China, and what Apple's doing, the biggest multinational company or successful company. So it's very inspiring. In terms of where we're working and the scale issue, yes, the approach that we used was meant as an experiment and something that could be rolled out with other landowners. So yes, I mean, in my experience in those conversations, people aren't very keen on the emergent aspect of it, that it's not planned. And so I don't know if, I think probably the part of the learning is that you need to do a bit of planning in terms of infrastructure, but that the creativity comes from that open invitation and people finding those unexpected synergies and links and so forth. And in terms of scaling up, I mean, the Transition Town example that we work very closely with Transition Town.ness, that is the beginnings of the Transition Town movement, and it's a fantastic example of a movement that has become viral. From 10 years ago, just one transition town, we now have over 1,400 in 50 countries where experiences and examples are shared. But I think in terms of the scaling up, what we're keen to investigate is the issue of, I mentioned it briefly in my presentation, but where there are economies of scope, which are about economies around geographical proximity and collaboration, as opposed to economies of scale in terms of that we usually talk about in economics in terms of the benefits, the efficiency benefits of becoming bigger and bigger. So that's part of our experiment, really, is looking at the manifestation of economies of scope, and the overall impact is therefore through local level economies which are networked together. So we're looking at that type of model, I guess, a more viral networked approach.
Thank you, Julie. And Julie, you had a question for Joe and Joe.
Yes.
Social innovation. Would you like to ask your question for them? Oh,
Okay,
Julie,
may I?
muted.
Okay, actually, I think it's very important. Not only for circular economy, it's not only a pure technical issue and also a social issue. And
Yento, shall I just? I don't know if everybody can see the group chat, so if I'll just ask the question so everyone's on board. Great. So the question that I have to Joe and Yento is: do you think the circular economy is mainly about technological innovation, or do you have examples of social innovation as well? So Yento, thank you.
Now maybe we have noted that the sharing economy in China is grow very fast, and we have sharing bike and lots of sharing model in sharing business model in China now, and this is also very important to a circular economy in this because it's increase the user efficiency of lots of products and reduce the discharge of many older products, etc. So also it's I want the not technical issue can help many social innovation, and now we have a WeChat, and through WeChat people can organize different groups to discuss some public policy issue and to donate for some social impact program. And now it has been, traditionally this kind of donation is very difficult. You need to find a specific organization, and you need to remit to the a bank account, etc. But now you can donate every day, and just a little sum. It's very easy, and lots of programs through the e-commerce or WeChat platform. You can find lots of programs. You can choose this, and also many people also donate their steps, because it's we have a WeChat has some function about to record people's walking steps in a day, and you can donate your number of your steps to the to some social program, and to also including environmental protection program. So this is also very helpful to circular economy. Yeah.
Thank you, Jonto. And Joe, do you have an answer to that question around examples of social innovation as well as technical?
Yeah, for sure. So I think, in a way, not to blow our own trumpet too much, but I think the C100 is a way of kind of trying to create pre-competitive spaces for, these multi-stakeholder groups to come around and start working together and figuring out how they can collaborate, in new ways, and kind of almost share the risk of the investment in these new kind of business models, or these new kind of ways of working, and that really does challenge potentially some of the traditional roles around, public-private dynamics, and then there's this whole question of kind of funding as well. So what's the role for philanthropy? What's the role for private investment? Where I think that we are starting to see some interesting evolutions. I think what a very tangible example will be when you think about contracts. So I was talking to a construction company that has worked with a customer to develop a circular building. And typically the way construction works is that, a client will say, I want a building, recruit an architect will draw a design, a developer will then sign a contract to go off, and 2 years later the building will be there. So it's very kind of transactional in the sense that there's kind of cut and dry start and end points between the different stakeholders in that transaction. But to kind of build a circular building, they had to work very differently with the supply chain, because there were so many unknown questions that they were investigating as they went. So they had to completely rip up the original contract that they'd had as a kind of developer-customer relationship, and move into a kind of more open process where they actually agreed pricing, almost line by line, as they went through the project, and as they were able to answer questions around sourcing of certain materials, or using of certain design choices that they were making, and what the potential residual value was because of those design choices, and therefore what the cost should be, and where that should be shared. So that's a practical example. I think there's a huge area of opportunity when you think about the role of legal institutions, financial institutions in helping to enable this transition.
Thank you, Joe. Great. So I just have one more question for Julie, and then we'll wrap up. So Julie, one of the quotes that I really love that I've heard you say is that we don't need to economize ecology, but instead ecologize the economy. And I'm just wondering about, as we hear all these really wonderful examples, what are some of the qualitative or the emergent properties or the shifts in mindset or thought patterns that happen when people start to work within the circular economy? So as we have great leaders and people at all these different scales implementing these projects, what starts to happen to people as they start to think about the economy differently and start to design new systems based on ecology?
That's a big question, Della. But I do think that although maybe initially the focus of the circular economy was quite technologically driven about creating zero waste systems, I do think in the practice of the doing of the circular economy, as Joe was referring to, that there are opportunities for maybe more collaborative ways of working rather than just focusing maybe on business competition. So I think actually in the doing of it, opportunities for collaboration and mutuality evolve. And so the focus shifts not just entirely on volumes of waste recycled, but the evolution of more cooperative, trusting relationships, which I think is the foundation for business to be able to operate in any community, and ultimately is the foundation for sustainable ways of living. So I don't think I think they go hand in hand, the technological innovation and the social innovation. But sometimes I feel like the social innovation side can be a bit of the can get a bit left behind, be a bit seen as a soft partner, and what we need is hard technology. So I'm great to hear from our two speakers that aspects of social innovation are being integrated within their schemes. So
thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, John To. I just realized all of your names start with a J. And yeah, this has been a really lovely conversation. And I think, Julie, related to what you just said, I'm just thinking about that slide that you had, John To, that said, you know, it's not exactly bottom up or top down, because you showed that there were pilot studies and then they kind of influenced the national scale. And then, Julie, you talked about all the different players. And then, Joe, you talked about, you know, it's not just business, but policy influences business. And so, you know, what I'm really hearing is kind of, you know, you can work with any level, and you can work with where you are, whether you're in a community level, you're a business, you're a national policymaker, and the circular economy movement can happen at all those scales. So thank you for that. And I also love that we went from nappies to oyster mushroom stouts to industrial China. So what great examples and stories from today. So thank you all three of you for this conversation. And Leo, I'll hand it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Stella. Thanks for guiding the discussion, and thanks to all of our three J's, Joe, Julie, and Jinto, for sharing your experiences and insights of sort of circular economy in practice in three vastly different scales, working with three different type of stakeholders, and driving the transition to a circular economy from three separate angles. And that was a really, really interesting discussion, one that overshot our scheduled time slot, but I mean, you know, it's all worth it in the end. And for those of you who weren't able to put your questions or comments to the speakers, and if you want your questions asked, then I do implore you to still put these into the comments section on the session page, and we'll try and keep the conversation going, as we have done, overshooting by 15 minutes, but not to worry, it was a great conversation. And while that may be the end of this session, this first session curated by the Schumacher College, there are two more sessions coming up in the next couple of weeks at the DIF from Schumacher College. So on the 17th of November at 4 p.m. UK time, we'll be joined by a handful of great speakers from Schumacher College when they discuss ecological design thinking and also explore the idea that in design, small is beautiful. And then finally, on the 23rd of November, on the penultimate day of the DIF at 4 p.m., we'll also be joining some speakers from Schumacher College, where they will discuss new materialism and ecological design thinking. So thank you again, everybody, for making this conversation possible. It was a real treat to have you on board. And as I just said, we will try and keep the conversation going in the comments section and amongst ourselves, no doubt. And just if anybody interested in, as I'm sure there is many of you interested in circular economy content throughout the DIF, This year, the Circular Economy playlist is launched with 25 sessions around the circular economy to get you up to scratch. It's a mixture of pre-recorded and live content, and just released now 10 minutes ago on the DIF website. If you go to thinkdiff.co, it'll be there in front of you, is a bespoke interview with the founder of, the co-founder of Systemic Systems IQ, Martin Stuckty. So check that out, and check out the Circular Economy playlist on the playlist tab at thinkdiff.co. Well, that's it from me. And again, thank you so much, Della and Joe, Julie, and Jintu for joining us for the conversation today. Until next time at the DIF, that's it from me. Goodbye.